Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 news. A barrage of drama emerging from the Monaco Grand Prix. Yes, one of the dullest F1 races you are ever going to watch, but Charles Leclerc wins his home Grand Prix. Esteban Ocon potentially dropped for the next round in Canada after that first lap incident with his teammate Pierre Gasly and Lewis Hamilton, effectively implying the team is plotting against him in some way to benefit George Russell as his teammate. What is this potential sabotage that Hamilton seems to be implying? Is it actually going on? What does Toto Wolff have to say on the matter? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Couldn't make a video on the immediate reaction to Charles Leclerc's victory yesterday because I was at the Indy 500 watching a proper motor race. I'm not gonna lie, wow, what a time that was after all the rain delays. Met a couple of guys there as well this weekend, which was absolutely fantastic. And I'm not gonna lie, having Monaco and the Indy 500 on the same weekends, just, I swear it embarrasses Formula 1 every single year at this point. Like, when it rains at Monaco, sure, it can be interesting. And if strategy was actually a factor yesterday, then maybe there was something of interest. The interest was that Leclerc won and the first lap was absolute chaos, but we have never seen this before, and there was big questions by Verstappen raised and Russell and others as to just the fact that it was the most dull race they've ever driven in, and something might have to be done. Russell was happily lapping 3-4 seconds off the pace to nurse those medium tyres easily to the end of the Grand Prix with basically no degradation because he wasn't pushing at all. Verstappen still couldn't get past him regardless. Everyone was getting lapped in the entire field by Leclerc and the guys up front, and Leclerc takes an incredible victory, breaks the curse. Norris broke the win curse the other day. Leclerc now, so happy for him, man. Like, what a great storyline that is. Wins his home Grand Prix. But of course, big questions raised as to what you might need to do to Monaco or to these cars to actually make it viable to be an interesting race. Now, because of the red flag on lap 1 and the absolute mess that was, it did mean that they could change tyres on lap 1 and just go to the end of the race. Like, it is kind of ridiculous. I think that's even possible under the red flag still. But we've got to talk about this first lap instance as well, because this was Sergio Perez's car in absolute bits. I don't think I've ever seen an impact quite like this, at least at that point in Monaco, that had this much damage resulted. Yes, Mick Schumacher's car literally got cut in half after the swimming pool a couple of years ago now, but this was just unbelievable up the hill. The fact that Perez just walks out and is like, yeah, sound guys, was incredible. Like the safety of these cars. What it does mean though is a couple of things for Kevin Magnussen and also for Red Bull. They reckon this is going to cost them $2 to $3 million to repair this. Like, that is the amount of crash damage they suffered from this car getting completely totaled. Like, it's not even a front wing or a front suspension. It's the entire car got mangled, and, you know, thankfully, Perez was fine, but as Horner says, the damage is, you know, 2 million plus, which is a pretty big handicap when it comes to the budget cap, right? Because we know that Williams talk about this with Logan Sargent, that, you know, they're kind of cooking up all their cash reserves because he keeps putting it in the wall. This weekend, the Williams performance was nonetheless respectable, but that's a pretty big deal for Red Bull because when you're talking $2 million plus, that eats a lot into your development, you know, the amount of development you can actually do on your car. So that one incident may have consequences for the future of their team over the next season or so, especially when they are absolutely under pressure as it stands, as we'll see in a second. Now, we've got to talk about the whole Magnussen thing, right? Because I don't know what's got into this guy. Perez, sure, he got a bit of wheel spin or whatever it was coming up the hill, didn't have the best exit out of Sainte Devote, and Magnussen thought there was an opportunity. There wasn't really an opportunity. Lap 1, your teammate's next to you. Magnussen goes for the move on Perez, completely takes him out. It wasn't even on at all. I don't think Perez was really, should have been expected to expect Magnussen to stick the wheel up the inside there as he goes around to the right side, and obviously Perez like had the racing line anyway. But Magnussen goes for it in maybe a similar way to even what happened against Logan Sargent back in Miami. Hulkenberg gets taken out of the Grand Prix as well, but for some reason, no investigation on this. Now, sometimes lap 1, turn 1 incidents are said, all right, you know, racing incidents, right? To me, that wasn't just a racing incident, and it wasn't even lap 1, turn 1. It was going up the hill. We got through turn 1 successfully. So I'm very confused, but I even said this in a video maybe a week or so ago when Magnussen had the penalty after Miami, and he was 2 penalty points away from getting disqualified from another Grand Prix, because if he gets to 12 points on your license, that's it, a Grand Prix ban. But I've said before, and I'll say it again, that for some reason, whenever drivers get near a potential race ban, the stewards just close their eyes, they look the other way, they just don't seem to see a reason to give further points out. Like, if that wasn't penalty worthy for Magnussen on his license, especially because Ocon is going to get a 5-place drop for Canada and 2 points on his license, The fact that Magnussen got nothing for that crash, mind-blowing as far as I'm concerned. But maybe it shouldn't even be a surprise given the inconsistency of these stewards. But this is the Ocon-Gasly incident. Now, when I first saw this, because I was watching this live, but we didn't see this until after the fact, right? Because obviously there were plenty of other crashes and incidents going on elsewhere. Sainz, of course, didn't even mention yet the puncture with Piastri in the first corner. Sainz nearly got the move up the inside, but completely destroyed his tyre on Piastri, then gets blessed. But that was another thing with the stewards. Sainz was dead last, basically, apart from the drivers that DNF'd behind him after getting the puncture on the first lap. And Charles Leclerc and the entire field, apart from the DNF'ers, were safely through Sector 1 by the time the red flag was called. But for some reason, they said, no, we're going to go back to the starting order. So just confusing decisions. But this was a confusing decision by Ocon, because here he goes, if this actually wants to load, just sending it down the inside. And this is a move that you might want to make on another car when it's on maybe a safety car restart on lap, 75 or whatever. This is, and people are going to say, oh, well, there's a gap, so you go for it, or like the classic Senna quote. Here he is. Gasly's right in front of him. I think even at this point, they're P9, P10 right, because Sainz just got the puncture ahead of them. So they're in both points paying positions here. And here goes Ocon, just absolutely blasting it down the inside of his teammate. Like, Ocon is a good driver, and he is ahead on Gasly this year in race and qualifying results, which is pretty impressive because I think Gasly is very solid. But it's stuff like this. I mean, how many more times are we going to have to see this from Ocon? When, whoever his teammate is, he just wants to beat them at all costs. He does not care what the consequences are. Like, he just wants to beat his teammate. So he sends it down the inside here, a move that is, maybe it's on and fair play, but then he kind of squeezes Gasly into the wall here on the exit of the corner. Then he gets tagged by Gasly. What can Gasly really do? And Ocon gets flipped up into the air and crashes and, of course, sustains too much damage. Very easily, that could have taken both Alpines out of the race in a situation where they're both in the points-paying positions. Like, there was no reason to do that. Unless you're just trying to terrorize your teammate. Like, I can't think of any other explanation. And as Gasly says, you know what you can and can't do, especially with your teammate. He's a good driver. He knows what he's doing. He just needs to change. And that's the thing. Ocon then came up publicly and apologized and said, yep, that was a miscalculation on my part, hoping the team can still get points, which they did secure with Gasly in the end, of course, with his P10 finish for 1 point, so congratulations, I guess. But there's been talk after the race, and even since today, on what the future here might be, because Bruno Ferman was spotted, of course, their team principal, shortly after this incident, spotted talking with Jack Doohan, their reserve driver, Formula 2 driver, doing rather well, and I think son of Mick Doohan, right, the motorbike legend. So Alpine team principal says there will be consequences. We are going to make a tough decision, he says. And then fast forward to today, I think it was Craig Slater and Sky Sports are reporting that Ocon getting dropped for the Canadian Grand Prix is under serious consideration. So, look, there's lots to say on this because Ocon may be the superior driver on pure pace. Is this an excuse to get rid of Ocon? Because, I don't know, it seems that way to me. This one incident is obviously a big deal, but maybe the feeling from Alpine is, especially because Ocon has been reportedly looking elsewhere anyway, there's been links of Ocon to, like, Williams and some of these other seats that have been going around, even like Haas, I think, and stuff like this, he has been somewhat linked to. So maybe there's a feeling from Alpine that Ocon wants out anyway. He's not happy with the team. We need to break up the French civil war that is going to continue ruining our team internally. So maybe this is a perfect opportunity to say, you know what, Ocon, actually, we don't like you anymore. You're going to go. We're going to put Doohan in the car instead. Maybe for one Grand Prix, maybe for multiple, who knows? But yeah, there is a legitimate and serious possibility that Ocon gets dropped for Canada, which would be wild, but would it be, undeserved? I think I could argue that it might well be. So yeah, Bruno Ferman says Esteban's attack was completely out of the circumstances, exactly what we didn't want to see. We will draw consequences and we will decide straight away. So 2 weekends time in Canada, potentially expect to see Jack Doohan in the car rather than Esteban Ocon, if that actually comes true. Plenty other drama, though, to discuss, of course. We've got to talk Red Bull as well. Yuki Tsunoda, still today, reporters are saying that he has a maybe very slim outside chance of getting the Red Bull seat, but basically it's not going to happen, despite the fact that in the last several rounds, he has comprehensively outscored Aston Martin. He scored way more points over the last few rounds than Aston have as a team, which is very impressive, of course, and yeah, still reports as of today that he's just not being considered considered for that Red Bull seat next season. At the same time, the rumour is that the Perez deal is basically done. And we saw this reported a few days ago now that Perez had been offered a one-year deal. It's very close to conclusion, but I was thinking, look, Red Bull, you might want to bide your time here a little bit, especially after Monaco, right, where Perez has not been great. And look, it wasn't his fault getting taken out by Magnussen, but at the end of the day, if you're fighting with Magnussen, it's your fault that you're back there. Like, as unfortunate as it is to be next to Magnussen right now, if you are next to Magnussen, you're asking for trouble in terms of your qualifying pace and stuff like this. Apparently, though, Red Bull have turned down Sainz. That will now mean that it's, Williams or Audi for Sainz next season, probably not Mercedes, based on our understanding. The view from Red Bull seems to be more so a potential longer-term acquisition for Tsunoda in 2026 rather than next year, but I think it's going to be too late at that point, and Yuki will probably go somewhere else from the Red Bull family. But reports emerging today from multiple sources that this deal is basically done. It may not be announced before Canada, but it may be announced very shortly indeed that Perez will get an extension, despite the fact that he's had 2 horrible Grand Prix in a row. Max is, obviously was P6 in the race yesterday with no overtaking happening anywhere, and arguably could have been P7 if Mercedes actually made a good strategic call. We'll get into that one in a second. But, a horrible day for Red Bull, obviously. P6 and a DNF for Perez, and it becomes very clear that when the Red Bull isn't optimal by any means, Verstappen is able to extract what he can out of it, which is pretty much the maximum. Yes, he is going to make more mistakes, and even Vasseur is capitalizing on the good momentum for Ferrari and saying, look, Verstappen is making more errors now than he has done for the last 3 seasons, which maybe you think is an unfair assessment, but I think it is maybe even arguably true, just based on the performance of the car. The car is struggling in certain characteristics right now. The competition is more fierce, so Verstappen has to push harder and take more risk, and therefore you are going to make more mistakes. And Vasseur is saying, look, Ferrari, we're looking pretty good. We're going to make more progress, winning the race, of course, in the hands of Charles Leclerc yesterday, very comfortably so in the ends. But are you really telling me that this is the man that Red Bull are relying on to win them the Constructors' Championship alongside Max? These are the drivers' standings. Sure, Verstappen is still leading by a while, but the gap is now only 31 points, which I've said before that I think it would take a DNF for Max to lose the championship with a Leclerc victory. That is possibly still true, but I feel like there's now a chance. Like, if Leclerc was just to win every weekend and Max was second, like, this gap is overturnable. 31 points is not entirely out of reach. But Norris is 3rd, Sainz is 4th, Perez is now 5th, right? So 5th in the championship in drivers with a rocket ship. And okay, it's not been a rocket ship the last couple of rounds, but it was at the start of the season. And here we go with the constructors. Red Bull are only 24 points ahead. And McLaren even aren't that far back either. So there was a legitimate fight this year for the Constructors' Championship, and the way that Perez is driving, would you say that Red Bull are massively favoured to win it? I'm not so sure I would right now. Verstappen's still absolutely favourite for the championship, and I feel like as time goes on, the tracks that haven't been favouring Red Bull for the last couple of rounds will come back in their favour. But this weekend, in some ways, was a bit of a comeback for Mercedes. They actually beat a Red Bull. Russell out-qualified Verstappen, of course, and went on to beat him in the race. I mean, yeah, what a race it was, right? 77 laps on the medium tyre. Well done, George Russell, the tyre whisperer. Now, the funny thing about this is that it wasn't exactly an impressive stint, I didn't think, from Russell. I guess you can argue that it was, but he was just driving around like a Sunday drive. I don't think he was doing any crazy tyre whispering. He was just driving slowly, and Verstappen couldn't pass him because that is the nature of Monaco. The big drama, though, coming out of the Mercedes camp again is the Russell versus Hamilton internal drama, and I think that maybe it could have been expected this season, that given that Hamilton is on his way out, Russell will get preferential treatment in terms of upgrades and some of these other things. But the way that Hamilton described the internal circumstances sounded like he felt like there was more to it than just that. Yes, Hamilton's going to get excluded from certain meetings. Yes, Russell's going to get upgrades ahead of him. But I don't know, the way that Hamilton talked about it was quite fascinating. Yes, he is losing the teammate battle this year in the constructors, in the drivers, and also in the head-to-head qualifying battle, which I think is 7-1 in favour of Russell so far this year. But of course, Hamilton would have liked to have qualified better than 7th. The team worked really hard to bring the upgrades this weekend, but we only have one, which George has, right? So George got the upgrade and Hamilton didn't. So as he said, I think I anticipated it would be difficult to out-qualify him because he has the upgrades on the car. And to be fair, Mercedes said that, yeah, the upgrade package does work. The new front wing is better than the old front wing, and they will bring it to Hamilton's car the next race out in Canada. So, maybe it makes sense that Hamilton was unlikely to out-qualify Russell in the circumstance. But I did just want to share this clip for you guys on, his comments on out-qualifying Russell this year. And he made the comment that he doubts that he's going to out-qualify Russell over the course of the season. And, when asked about why, he says, we'll see about that. So the implication certainly being, because Hamilton obviously backs his own abilities, that there is some sort of internal dynamics at Mercedes that are favouring Russell over himself.
Yeah, I don't anticipate being ahead of George in qualifying, particularly in this year. We just got to keep pushing. The races are strong.
Why all year?
We'll see.
Even after the race, when he scored the fastest lap, he said, look, I'm putting the points on the board. Are you going to have the front wing upgrade for the next race? And he says, yeah, hopefully I'll have the upgrade. Fingers crossed I'll have the upgrade. Which is kind of interesting, right? Because, the team have told the media that he's getting the upgrade. But yet Hamilton's sitting there thinking, well, maybe they'll give it to me, maybe they won't type thing. Which kind of implies that he feels like there is some sort of, dodginess happening behind the scenes at Mercedes. Now, obviously, Hamilton is in a better position than us to comment on this because he actually is there with the team, hearing what's going on, hearing the meetings and these other things. And, maybe there is some truth to the idea that there is some Russell, some serious Russell favouring internally. But the implication is that there's even some degree of sabotage, right? Because Hamilton was kind of saying, well, we're there in qualifying or we're there in practice the whole weekends. And then when qualifying happens, losing a couple of tenths here or there. Just not quite as competitive maybe as Russell in those moments. The other piece that really, I was thinking, okay, well, maybe there's probably nothing to this. But after the race, given this outlap situation, people have wondered, was this just a mistake from Mercedes, and a bad mistake at that? Or is there more to it than even that? Because Hamilton comes into the box. Mercedes had a slam dunk opportunity here to undercut Verstappen because Verstappen was playing a 2 versus 1. He was behind Russell ahead of Hamilton. So all Mercedes really needed to do was bring Hamilton into the box, get him to pits. And then Russell would just absolute sandbag, slow down Verstappen. Hamilton would come out of the pits, come out ahead of probably both of them, which maybe Russell wouldn't be happy with. But, if you want to maximize points for the team, that would have potentially been the strategy. Got the overcut on Verstappen and secured an easy 2 Mercedes ahead of Max rather than the other way around. Hamilton comes into the pits and of course he's, wondering, okay, what am I doing? Am I pushing on the outlap? Because there's a question here. Are Mercedes just going for the fastest lap points? So they're pitting Hamilton for fresh tyres so we can go for the fastest lap and therefore you want to ease the tyres in? Or are they pitting Hamilton to undercut Verstappen? And people are saying, Lewis should have known better, rookie mistake and all this, but he doesn't have the information. He's there in the car. His job is to drive the car. He doesn't have the information the team has on the pit wall. So he has to listen to what the team say. Bono comes on the radio and says, outlap normal, as in ease the tyres in, no pressure, no stress, nothing like that. What he should have said was outlap critical. And this is what Hamilton said afterwards. He was like, why did you not tell me that was outlap critical to get the pace on the board to undercut Verstappen and then probably secure the fastest lap point as well? Alex Jakes even says, yeah, super sloppy from Mercedes. No other word for it. The whole team just didn't perform, lost a chance of upgrading points because, I don't know, it's very interesting because you look at this decision and you think, well, was that decision made? I don't understand how you make a mistake like that in that scenario if you're Mercedes, not making that seemingly pretty obvious communication. Toto Wolff says, yeah, that was a miscommunication. We got it wrong. It should have been outlap critical. It wasn't Hamilton's fault. That was the team's fault. But then you got to think, well, if they did that, would Hamilton ended up ahead of Russell? Would Russell not have been happy about that? Did they want to ensure that, not for the second weekend in a row, Hamilton ends up ahead of Russell on a strategy thing? Strange, really strange occurrences at Mercedes. But after Hamilton made the comments in qualifying, I thought, right, that's interesting, but maybe nothing, not so much evidence behind it. Then you see this in the race and you think, hang on a second, is Hamilton actually cooking something here? People are kind of petty about this as well, and maybe there's nothing in this. But, Russell got the fastest lap point, whenever it was, and they said, I'll get in the fastest lap point for the fastest lap extra point and all this. They haven't done this for Hamilton yet, so people are saying, oh, well, here we go, Mercedes bias to Russell. And maybe there's something in it, maybe there isn't. Obviously, Toto comes out and says, equal treatment, always transparent and fair between the teammates. We've tried to manage these areas. So, obviously he is going to say that. But Hamilton seems to feel differently internally. So, man, look, the Monaco Grand Prix was dull on the surface, absolutely. But was the Monaco Grand Prix interesting in terms of the storylines resulting? Absolutely. And this is also the best start that Ferrari have had to a season in a very, very long time. So hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you are new, take care, and I will see you next time.